Ladies and gentlemen, this is Kim Greenhouse, and you are tuning into It's Rainmaking Time. To find us these days on It's Rainmaking Time, you can find us at iTunes, on itsrainmakingtime.com.ch. We do post to YouTube, but due to the number of health interviews that have been removed from YouTube, we may post it, but we're not going to hold our breath that it may stay. You and I are living in a world today where most of us will look at peer review and will feel and think that that is the gold standard of learning about new discoveries and new things. We did a whole show on peer review so that you better understand that it may not be, and it for sure is not what you think it is. So many incredible discoveries don't get through peer review and are often buried or hidden or deliberately suppressed. They can go on for 75 years. And so when a true discovery comes out that's been around a long time, but that is body of research is synthesized and brought to you in the modern day, when we have the allopathic medical field, we have pharmacology, and we have the integrated medicine field, what you may find is that you're in no man's land when you hear the information. And so what I want to invite you all to do is to fall in love with learning, to be receptive, because this discovery is so important. It will impact your health and well-being now and for the rest of your lives, also for your children, their children, and for this and future generations. This is a hidden discovery and a necessity for all biological life. In fact, copper has been missing from the food production area. It's been missing from medicine. It's been missing from our daily food and all of agriculture. You're going to find out that it is so essential to all living parts of our body, all our organ systems, our energy systems. And yet the copper metabolism, as it relates to iron, is totally missing from a central understanding of biological health and well-being. Our guest is a renowned pioneer. He is the author of the book, Cure Your Fatigue, How Balancing 3 Minerals and Protein is the Solution That You're Looking For. He is also the founder of the Root Cause Protocol, where he's training practitioners how to deliver health and wellness, and even challenging the entire supplement industry, challenging pharmacology, challenging the mainstream narrative. And so a lot of us that believe what we believe and have these strongly held beliefs may have trouble with some of it, but a lot of us are going to be delighted. It is my great honor and pleasure to welcome somebody I consider the Copper Rabbi, Morley Robbins. Welcome to It's Rainmaking Time.
Oh, thank you, Kim. I love that.
It's true.
That's funny. That's a great appellation. I love that. If anyone had told me in my 50s that 20 years later I'm going to be taking on the entire medical establishment, challenging the narrative of every conceivable industry that deals with health, I'd say, no, I don't think so. But now that I'm here, I'm loving it. I've never had so much fun in my life. I've never learned so much. And for the listeners, I've been doing this for 15 years now, spending 2 to 3 hours a day, 7 days a week for 15 years. And you read a lot of articles in that time frame. And just to reinforce what you've shared, Kim, I had the opportunity to spend an entire day with a renowned consultant to the natural food industry. His name is Michael Greenberg, very talented guy. And he said, Morley, what you're going to find is everybody wants to know what's new. Hey, Michael, what's new? What's new? He said, my sincere advice to you is focus on what's enduring and let go the new stuff. And it was that conversation that for some reason I looked back in time and I discovered that there was a point in the Earth's history when there was no oxygen on this planet for many, many years. I mean, how the astrobiologists know this, I have no idea. But what is an established fact is that copper saved us from that environment.
How?
Copper is, well, it's unique in its ability to work with oxygen. It's unique in its ability to work with iron. And it turns out that those are the two most powerful toxic elements on planet Earth. After fluorine gas, oxygen is the most reactive element on the planet. Iron is the master pro-oxidant on the planet. And what kills us? Oxidative stress. And every conceivable chronic disease you know of has unchecked oxidative stress at its core. Why?
But you know
Because
what, Morley? Can I interrupt you here
yeah,
for just a
please.
minute?
Yeah.
A lot of people, when they hear that, oxidative stress, we hear it like you have stress. So what? We all have stress. So what?
Right.
In other words, it's been normalized in conversation, particularly in the health and well-being, longevity
Right.
circles. You have oxidative stress. So for most of us, we don't know how to hold that. It's like, okay, but it has
Well,
profound biological effects. Explain it.
absolutely. Let me bring it down a notch. 20% of our air we breathe is oxygen. It's a poison. We can't live without it. We can't age without it either. And so we have mitochondria in our body that are able to turn that O2 molecule into two molecules of H2O. Got to turn oxygen into water. And that, I think it's the most important chemical reaction on the planet. That transfer of oxygen into water allows energy molecules to be released. That's what keeps us going all day long. We make our body weight in ATP every day. And if you can't turn oxygen into water, you're not going to release the ATP. But more importantly, you're going to turn the oxygen into oxidants. And I call them accidents with oxygen. It's going to become superoxide. It's going to become hydrogen peroxide. It's going to become the hydroxyl radical. Something very negative, peroxynitrate. There's some very destructive elements that are produced if the oxygen does not become water in our mitochondria. And the complex where that takes place is called complex 4. And the enzyme is called cytochrome C oxidase. Otto Warburg got the Nobel Prize in 1931. And what's the enzyme classification for cytochrome C oxidase? EC 1.9.3.1. So that's why I always
What is
remember when.
that?
Well, that's just the saying. That's just telling you exactly where it's taking place. It's an oxidase reaction taking place in the liver, and that's how the enzyme classification system runs. But the point is, we cannot make energy and we cannot clear exhaust if we don't have bioavailable copper. And so when we're driving our car, we're moving forward and we don't pay attention to the exhaust coming out the other end. But there is exhaust coming out. There's always exhaust coming out of our car, and there's always exhaust coming out of mitochondria. A certain level is fine. Is when the exhaust gets too high, then it becomes what's called oxidative stress, and the body loses its ability to respond to the environment. And so when we have stress in our world, got a deadline, had an argument with my spouse, had a lousy meal, oh, I got food poisoning, whatever it might be. When you have stress in your world, you have oxidative stress in your body. And that oxidative stress is causing cellular energy deficiency. And that's the base before all of the chronic disease. There's 20,000 conditions profiled in the Merck manual, and they all begin with cellular energy deficiency.
Okay, so let's establish another reference point for the listeners who may have heard that copper is a toxin that that basically it's unmanaged, it's loose in the system.
Right.
It's dangerous to the system. How did that come to be? And how did the iron relationship with copper come into your awareness?
Great question. I started out studying magnesium because we lose magnesium when we're under stress. I was just fascinated by that and studied. I started with Carolyn
No,
Dean, and then graduated to Mildred Seelig, who was a very noted figure. She was a physician who really brought a lot of truth forward about magnesium. And I was just fascinated by why are we always losing magnesium? And one day I was reading an article about iron, and the author decided to wake me up and use the phrase, the greatest stress on planet Earth is iron stress. I went, oh my gosh. And I began to realize how much iron is in our body. And that iron stress got me to oxygen, to connect the iron and the oxygen. And we're talking over a period of several years. This didn't happen in a matter of weeks, but
never does it?
never does. And then I began to question, so why is the oxidative stress unchecked? Because there's a lack of copper-based enzymes to neutralize that oxidative stress. And so it was over probably a period of 3 or 4 years, I began to move away from magnesium. It got me to copper. And the way I describe it is if copper is not bioavailable, it will cause iron and oxygen to get dysregulated. And that's what causes the magnesium loss. So that's how that evolved over a number of years. To your point about copper toxicity, there are what I call men of science that are just doing their job. Louis Pasteur was one of those men of science. Ansel Keys, a man of science. Anthony
Linus
Fauci,
Pauling.
Linus Pauling, Anthony Fauci, men of science, just following orders. Another order taker, as far as I'm concerned, is an individual named Carl Pfeiffer. He got his PhD before he got his MD. It should make you a little nervous. It means he didn't get into medical school right away. And turns out he was a principal in the MK Ultra program at the CIA. Well, when I find out information like that, it immediately discredits that person because he's doing that with the CIA and he's trying to tell me that copper is toxic. I don't think so. So he published some very important articles in the 60s.
I have chills all over my body, by the way, as you're talking about this.
Well, it's just, again, following orders, doing what he's told to do. And he got people to believe that copper had a relationship with zinc. And all this started in the 60s. I've studied the literature from 1900 up to, all the way up to the present day. But prior to 1960, the focus was iron and copper. Very clear focus. Some of the great scientists, Otto Warburg, Hans Krebs, Conrad Elvium, someone you've never heard of, or Dr. Hart or Dr. Schultz. These are luminaries in the world of mineral research. They were obsessed with iron and oxygen. Why? Iron and copper, excuse me. Because they were focused on making energy. There's nothing about zinc that makes energy. What does zinc do? Oh, it blocks copper uptake. Oh, it destroys the ferroxidase enzyme function of ceruloplasmin, which is a critical copper protein, which I'm sure we'll chat more about. It stops the cytochrome C oxidase function in complex 4 of the mitochondria that's turning oxygen into water. But yet we're supposed to venerate zinc and ignore copper.
So many copper supplements of the very few that are on the market are connected and have a portion of zinc in it, including some very big providers. So that also means, and sometimes you don't know, are they doing it so they don't get in trouble or they don't want to rock the boat to have bioavailable copper without the zinc? It's hard to know what is the motivating factor. But Zinc has been touted very big in the last 5 years since C19 arrived
Yep,
on the scene, and it was pushed by some very wonderful people as part of a healing methodology.
of
So
course it
I'm sure
was.
it's going to ruffle feathers to even be bringing this up.
I've been ruffling feathers for 15 years,
You're a
but
professional. That's what.
that's right. No, it was in March of 2020 when I was reflecting on the COVID cocktail: high dose ascorbic acid, high dose vitamin D, high dose zinc. Well, that's the triad to kill the bioavailability of copper. And so at that point, I renamed what COVID stood for. COV stands for coppers vanished. ID, iron's dysregulated. The part that you and your listeners may not know about was the research that was done in March of 1928 at the University of Wisconsin, where Dr. Hart and his team withheld copper from the animal's diet, and iron exploded in their liver. 3 months later, in May of 1928, Dr. McHarg did the same experiment. Just to have established science, you got to have two independent labs. So just from 100 years ago, they knew that if copper was not in the diet, it was going to cause this massive accumulation of iron. And what does that do? Oh, yeah, if you put a lot of iron in the liver, you're going to kill copper metabolism and retinol metabolism. Well, why is that important? Because if you're trying to destroy the bioavailability of copper, you want to get rid of copper and retinol, and, and voila, that's what we have. And so there's a very famous plant physiologist named Sabiha Merchant, very talented individual. And in one of her signature articles called Between a Rock and a Hard Place from 2006, she profiles side by side copper enzymes that were meant to run the planet and iron enzymes that have replaced them. So you probably heard of cytochrome P450 enzymes. They're very prevalent in the liver. There's a family of like 52 different enzymes.
I haven't, but
Okay, that's all
as
right.
Warren Bennis once told me, there's gaps in your education, Miss Greenhouse. This is
That's
when I
okay.
was 19.
That's all right. So cytochrome P450 is a big deal in the liver, in an iron toxic liver, because the enzyme that's supposed to run the liver is called tyrosinase. And tyrosinase is found at the center of the whole food vitamin C complex. It's not found in ascorbic acid.
By the way, I
And
did a whole show on ascorbic acid. I did a whole show on vitamin D. And remember, these things are done in time, right?
right,
Oh,
right.
and they're done over time. And what so many of us forget when we hear these, I can't tell you how many health practitioners are standing up, these fitness people, telling people to take high dosage of vitamin D,
Right,
D3, et cetera.
right.
Massive. I was on 10,000 a month from the practitioner that was guiding me 5 years ago until I found out about the root cause protocol. It was shocking, shocking. Say, if you could, to the people taking vitamin D, the supplement, or D3, tell them what they need to know. Again, I know you've said it 1,000 times, but you're on its rainmaking time, so please.
The most important thing to know about, well, let's back up. The question that you've never asked when you were told that you were vitamin D deficient was you didn't ask the question why, and the doctor couldn't have told you. The enzyme that makes the storage D, there's two types. There's storage and active. Like all hormones, it's a hormone, folks. It's not a vitamin. That's
Right,
all.
right.
That's all a little game. But there's a storage level and an active level, and the storage level takes the precursor, couples it with magnesium and the enzyme, the 25 hydroxylase enzyme, and turns it into 25 hydroxy vitamin D. And that's what gets measured in the blood test. Every blood test you've ever had for vitamin D is that,
Right.
and it's made in your liver. If you're like most people in the Western civilization, you don't have much copper in your diet. So iron is building in your liver. It's a fact. And when iron is building in your liver, that 25 hydroxylase enzyme doesn't work so well. And so the production of vitamin D, storage D, will be down. You'll be told you're deficient, but they can't tell you why. I'm telling you why. Because you've got too much iron, and iron causes oxidative stress in the liver and causes magnesium loss. That's part of the magnesium burn rate that we talk about within the root cause protocol. The other part they've not told you is that there is an active form that's principally made in the kidneys, and it's called 125 hydroxy vitamin D. And it's made by another enzyme called 125 hydroxylase enzyme, or hydroxylase enzyme. The part that they've never told you is that there's an enzyme called PAM, PAM. You've never heard
Yeah,
it.
I was going to ask you about Pam.
No doctor's ever told you about PAM, but it
No,
stands for
that's true.
peptidoglycine alpha amidating monooxygenase. I get $1 every time I say it, so I can't wait to
You
get that
should.
done.
I
Yeah,
hope you're collecting.
that's right. 35 letters long. And that enzyme activates hormones. Oh, signaling peptides. Oh, neurotransmitters. Oh, guess how many there are in your body? 4,700. There's one enzyme, the PAM enzyme, copper dependent, doesn't work without copper. And you can't turn your hormones on, your neurotransmitters on, your signaling peptides on without the PAM enzyme, kissing them to make sure that they're active. And so, I don't know, I think people need to know that there's this
That is
central,
shocking.
yeah,
That
no,
is
it's,
shocking.
and so the body makes parked cars. Literally, all your signaling peptides are parked cars. A parked car doesn't do you any good until you can turn it on, right? That's really why we
Right.
drive cars, is so we can move. And can't can't turn the engine on without the PAM enzyme. And so the active form of D is made principally in the kidney. Oh, but it's also made in macrophages, which are the Pac-Men that gobble up the bad guys. And when the macrophages start making the active form, it means you're really sick. And your active D will start to rise because what is it trying to do? It's trying to kill the pathogens behind the illness that you've got. And it's called antimicrobial peptides. And 125 hydroxy vitamin D will become an antimicrobial peptide under the right conditions. I don't know. I think that's really good to know. And so
Why aren't
this
we
very,
testing for that? Can we test for that?
of course you can test for it. Of course you can test for it. But
Fascinating.
but doctors will test for storage and active hormones all day long, thyroid, sex organs, there's a whole bunch of them that they'll test, both storage and active. Oh yeah, yeah. But when it comes to hormone D, well, that active, it's a very short-lived metabolite. I'm like, they're all short-lived if they're active. And they've hide behind this facade of like, I know what I'm talking about when I tell you that active D is not very long lived. Like, well, let's look at the number, and there's a relationship between storage and active. Storage, the number for active, it's measured in picograms. Storage is measured in nanograms, but the number should be 2.5 times bigger than storage. I've had clients where it's been way higher than that. And what that means is they are really populated with pathogens, and the practitioner doesn't know that. And so it's just
Fascinating.
it's a
Absolutely fascinating.
whole nother world
It
of
is.
understanding what's going on.
I want to go back to, or I want to go to, if we can, for you to tie in ceruloplasmin and explain what it is, because I
Yeah,
had my blood taken months ago before I left to move to Virginia.
yeah.
And one of your practitioners was my consultant,
Okay.
and we tested it, tested everything. But I was shocked that most of us are not taking a test to look at ceruloplasmin. So I want you to explain why it's so important.
So the two words that I despise the most in medicine and nutrition are high and low. Oh, you're high. Oh, you're low. The real word is bioavailable. Is the nutrient that you're worried about usable? Is it bioactive?
Oh, I love that. I love that. That's a
Yeah.
very
Who cares
profound
about whether it's high or
distinction.
low? Yeah. And so what makes copper usable are the enzymes. And there are scores of enzymes that you've never heard about. Um, and I'm not going to go there right now, but at some point I'll explain a really important enzyme. It's the most prevalent enzyme on planet Earth, and it's copper dependent. But yet we know that copper is toxic, right? Wink, wink. And so ceruloplasmin is a protein that has 1,046 amino acids. To give you a frame of reference, insulin has 45. So we're talking about something that has 1,046. Oh, and it has 8 copper atoms inside it. Wow. Maybe that's a pretty complicated. Yeah, it is pretty complicated. It's pretty darn important too. And so in the world of biochemistry, you have what are called substrates. These are elements that serve to stimulate activity within a protein to create what's called enzyme function. Great book on enzymes for the folks who are in the reading crowd. Enzymes,
The
the
fountain of life.
fountain of life. Enzymes are little engines. Can't live without them. And so this protein, this very large protein that was discovered in 1948 by Holmberg and Laurel, two Swedish physiologists who they thought they discovered the Holy Grail. They in fact
Maybe
had.
they did.
They
I
did.
was going to say.
And so cerulo is a word for blue, blue in the plasma, in the plasmin, ceruloplasmin, and it can work with 15 different substrates. Now, if you get into the literature, they'll tell you, oh, it's only for iron. Don't worry about anything else. There are actually 15 different elements like oxygen, amine groups, phenol groups, diphenol groups. And again, I'm not trying to turn people into biochemists, but I want you to understand the raw intelligence of this protein, that it can work with 15 different substrates and express 15 different enzyme functions, which is a very hard concept to accept. So this protein can be a skateboard. Oh, you want a bike? I can do bike. Yeah. You want a motorbike? Oh, got that. Oh, you want an airplane? I can do the airplane if you want. And it has this capacity to flex to the situation, which requires intelligence, but it also requires copper in the diet, but it also requires retinol in the diet, because retinol, very important element that's been overshadowed by vitamin D, right? So retinol is vitamin
Totally.
A, totally. And what's
I
useful
think
for
it's been
people
demonized too, Morley.
oh,
Vitamin A has been demonized heavily. I mean, I look at a
absolutely.
carrot, I'm scared to put it in a salad.
That's right. No,
Watch
two
out for the carrots.
two fat soluble vitamins have been weaponized. Those would be vitamin D and K, and two fat soluble vitamins have been ostracized, vitamin A and E. And if you knew how important vitamin A and E were, you'd be running down the street like your hair was on fire, screaming, why didn't they tell me this? And so
Well, I'm
vitamin
going to
A,
ask why they didn't tell me. I'm going to ask why they didn't tell
all
me.
right,
For example, I have dry eye,
you're
and
you're,
I am
you're
so
vitamin A,
mad.
you're vitamin A
I am
deficient.
so mad about it. And I've been through, just to tell you, sorry to interrupt you, I've been through
It's all right.
all the most advanced tests. Okay. They're liquids, they're this, they're that. Well, by the way, I just ordered, what do you call it? The cod liver oil. And I'm telling you, I am so excited to get rolling because I have a feeling it's going to end. Honestly,
Well,
it's
I
got
have
it.
more than a feeling. I'm pretty confident. Um, how did how far do we go with this conversation?
As
I
far as you
think
want to go.
Well, I think everyone wants to know is the Earth flat or round, right? That's one of the basic questions. It's actually a
Is there?
petri
What does
dish.
that mean?
Well,
Oh,
but it's a petri dish. We are just a
mhm.
lab experiment. That's really what I think. And the operating system of the people at the top feeds off of our misery. That's how simple it is. And you don't need to be a conspiracist to believe that there must be people at the top who are doing some really crazy things. So, and maybe off world. I don't know. I don't have enough knowledge about that. I just know that the goons in charge right now don't want us to know this knowledge. And we were never designed to be this broken, to be this tired, to be this defective. And over the course of the last century, I think it started
Yeah.
before the First World War, but the
Well, look
First
what
World
happened
War
with the
was a big,
cholesterol. The whole cholesterol thing is a lie. You know how many people we know are on what is the drug that they're giving everybody
statins,
for cholesterol?
statins.
Statins. I did a whole show on the whole cholesterol, how the lie came to be,
Yeah,
what was done in it. This is years ago I did this. It
but
was
but
shocking then, but it didn't stop people from taking it.
but this is the
And
part you didn't know. There's a process of making what are called iron sulfur clusters. So most of our iron is tied up in moving blood, moving oxygen, really, in hemoglobin. But 70% of our iron is tied up in hemoglobin, 10% is in myoglobin. It's a, a, a molecule that's holding oxygen for the muscles. So 80% of our iron is a waiter carrying oxygen. But there's a certain percentage that goes into making what are called iron sulfur clusters. And it's a mixture of iron and sulfur working together to enable the mitochondria to work for the most part. The part you didn't know is that there's an enzyme called ferroredoxin. Ferroredoxin is really important to work with iron so that it doesn't become problematic in making an iron sulfur cluster. Oh, did I forget to tell you that ferroredoxin is copper dependent? And if copper goes down, the activity of ferroredoxin doesn't work right. And guess what rises? Cholesterol.
iron. Oh,
No,
cholesterol.
cholesterol. Cholesterol rises.
Wow.
And so it turns out that there's 11 molecules of oxygen in every molecule of cholesterol. So what is cholesterol? It's an oxygen sink because it knows you don't have enough copper to activate it. It's going to put it into cholesterol to protect you. Cholesterol was never the bad guy. Cholesterol was telling you, hey, we got a problem here. And cholesterol alone was never the problem. It was the rusting of the cholesterol. Well, what was causing the rust? Oh, yeah, they started putting iron filings in the food system in 1941.
Oh my God.
And so when they started adding iron filings, that created an oxidative environment to rust the cholesterol that affected the enterocytes. I mean, not the enterocytes, the endothelium. And it's like, I mean, I could go on for 2 hours about what happened, but the point is, all of it stems from the fact that people didn't understand copper and iron and oxygen, and it's a three-ring circus. And if you understand how that three-ring circus works, you'll be fine. If you don't, you believe in disease, you believe in the nostrums of your doctor, and the whole purpose of the root cause protocol is to make the system irrelevant. You don't need this system. And I know there are a lot of sick people out there with all sorts of conditions, but at the very core of every one of those conditions is rising oxidative stress because you're not making energy because you don't have enough copper in your mitochondria.
But isn't there also with that the overaccumulation of iron? That's what I read a
Absolutely.
lot also in your book. But
Absolutely.
can you speak to that and the dangers of that? Because like I went to give blood the other day. I went to the Red Cross. And the
Right.
Red Cross saved my life as a baby. My mom
Oh,
was
okay.
Rh negative, I was Rh positive, and I was jaundiced, and they kept me in the hospital 3 weeks, and they called me the miracle baby, whatever. I think that's the first time I was famous. But and they were before they gave me the test. They were checking to see if I had enough iron in my system to
Right.
see if they should continue. And I had gone to a completely different place when I was in Charlotte, North Carolina, but I didn't understand why they were doing that. Why were they checking if I had enough iron? If in fact, what you're saying through your
Well,
research is we have an oversupply almost.
so the meme that runs medicine on the planet is you're anemic and you're copper toxic. And if I can convince you that you need more iron and stop playing with that copper thing, I will have a patient for life. That's really what it's based on. And the, there's dietary iron and there's recycled iron. And here's the part that's really wild. Um, the average woman has about 4,000 milligrams of iron in their body. The average guy about 5,000. At least that's what we're told. If you want to know how much iron you really have in your body, get out your calculator, punch in your age, and multiply it times 365. Because you gain a milligram of iron every day you're on planet Earth. This is a formula that's used by all iron biologists. It's not my formula. You know, Robert Crichton made sure I understood that formula. I said, Dr. Crichton, I've read your material. He said, I just want to make sure you understand, Morley. I said, okay. He's the dean of iron biology on the planet. His textbooks are used in all medical schools on the planet. I'm not talking to Billy Bob Thornton down the street. I'm talking to Robert Crichton, who's a really big name in mineral metabolism. And so I've got 26,000 milligrams of iron in my body. A multiple of five times more iron than I should have based on that formula. And so it turns out that we have iron in our diet, but we also have a system. The formal name is called reticuloendothelial system. It took me 2 years to figure out that meant recycling.
Even pronouncing it is pretty good.
I know, but it's a recycling system.
Yeah.
And every second of every day, we replace 2.5 million red blood cells every second. In the course of 24 hours, we replace 200 billion red blood cells. Now, to put this into context, one red blood cell has 1 billion atoms of iron. And so we're clipping along.
1 billion.
1 billion atoms of iron. And we're clipping along at 2.5 million red blood cells a second, replacing them.
Wow.
And what's happening is that those red blood cells are being broken down in our spleen, which is on the left side. And then that iron that gets released in that process needs to get attached to something called transferrin, transport iron, transferrin. And that attachment of iron to transferrin happens 2.5 times faster in the presence of ceruloplasmin. Oh, we're back to that funny protein that loves to work with iron and oxygen. And so ceruloplasmin is making sure that there's this acceleration of getting iron onto transferrin, get it back down to the bone marrow, because the highest attraction for iron is in our bone marrow, so we can make new blood, new red blood cells, new white blood cells, new platelets. All that's coming out of the bone marrow. But what's really interesting to find out is that we have 100 milligrams of copper in our body. Guess where 50% of it's hanging out? Oh, it's in the bone marrow. In the bone marrow. And copper is slicing and dicing and making sure that this incoming flood of iron is being properly placed into heme, that the heme is going into the hemoglobin, and the hemoglobin is going into the red blood cell. 2.5 million red blood cells a second. Because for everyone that's dying on one side, you got another one in the bone marrow that's got to be replaced. And have you ever seen the film clip of Lucy and Ethel at the chocolate factory?
Oh, that's one of my favorites.
I know, it's classic, right? And then the manager comes out and says, speed it up, boys. What is speed it up, boys? COVID, had an argument with my spouse, eating a lousy diet, was in a car accident. And that stress changes the whole process of making red blood cells. It's called stress erythropoiesis. Very fancy term for making new
Really?
red blood cells under stress. And it's a whole different ball game. And none of that's taught in doctor school. They're just taught that you're anemic and you need more iron. Or as they say in Alabama, more iron. I need more iron.
But let's
And
just suppose that no doctor says you're anemic. You're not anemic, okay? But you still have this issue. Every human has this issue, or any biological form of life at this time. As I understand from reading your book, that we don't have enough copper to make
right.
the best and the optimal energy and longevity of our organ systems and everything else.
Right. Let me just finish out the recycling
Yes,
system and then
please.
come back to your question.
Okay.
So we're told that we need about 18 to 20 milligrams of iron a day. No, that's not true. What we need is, if you want to get really technical,
Yeah.
24.4 milligrams of iron by way of a recycling system that's run by copper. Thank you very much. We need 1 milligram of iron a day from our diet. And so if you want to be healthy, you really restrict the amount of iron going through your mouth, and you build up your bioavailable copper to ensure optimal turnover of the iron in your recycling system. So 95% of the iron that we need every day to make 200 billion red blood cells, it's the greatest concentration of iron in the course of 24 hours, is making new red blood cells. We got to have copper. And we just need a little tiny bit through our diet. And what they've done is they've pushed the recycling system aside. And don't talk about that. Let's talk about everything's about iron absorption. Iron absorption. Did you absorb enough iron? Are your enterocytes absorbing iron? You need more ascorbic acid if you're not getting enough iron in your diet. And they're ignoring completely the recycling system, which is providing 95% of the iron that's needed in the body. So then what you've got is on top of that confusion is you have a iron fortification program that's on steroids. And so now everything is fortified, wink, wink. The only people who are being fortified are the people making the product. They're making a lot of money, and they're adding a lot of iron to our flours. Think of all the products that we buy every day. Think of all the feed that animals are eating every day that have been fortified. And then we go one step farther and we take one a days or some kind of supplement that's got all sorts of iron in it. It's going to have at least 18 to 20 milligrams of iron. There's prenatals out there that have 65 milligrams of iron every day. I heard of an individual whose father was given 900 milligrams of iron every day. Guess what happened to his father? He died of a heart attack.
Cancer?
Heart attack.
Yeah.
He died of a heart attack
Yeah.
after about 3 weeks of that regimen. And the doctor was shocked. He said, well, he's so anemic. And the part that people don't understand is, if the iron may show low in the blood, there's no measurement of iron high in the tissue. That's where the crisis is.
This is where the action is. Wow.
That's exactly where the action is. And so we have all sorts of detailed measurement in the blood, but we're not looking back at the tissue. We can do that through MRI. We can do it through
Now I hear that's being done in Florida. Is that true? You are connected with someone who's actually doing MRI of the tissue to see how much iron is in storage?
Yes, and there's a company out of Australia called Ferroscan, Ferroscan, and they have MRIs all over the world that are devoted to measuring iron in the organs, but principally in the liver, and then they're working on the heart, and they're eventually going to have it for all the organs.
That's incredible. And as a matter of fact, we know that in Chinese medicine, in acupuncture and with the meridian system that the liver is where the action is for between health and wellness.
Right.
What's happening in the liver. So let us suppose that this kind of testing, becomes available to more people. Let us suppose that they have an overaccumulation of iron in the liver. Now what? We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be back to the show. You and I are living in a world where our attention span is being electronically stolen from us. Our focus is waning. It is as if we're going through a divorce just being in society where people are being factionalized against each other. This group against that group against this group against that group. News stations are promoting this. Newspapers are promoting this. It's a never-ending, Gordian knot that we're in. I'm a pioneer. And I've been on an over 40-year mission to set up a next-generation solution and discovery network to get and fast-track solutions and discoveries to get into the world. What I've been through in these last 40 years is unbelievable. What I've learned, what I've been through, the countries I've lived in, the challenges I've been through, and the discoveries that I've made along the way. It's not to be believed. I want to share it with you. I want to talk to pioneers and communities. I want to talk to authors and creative people. I want to talk to entrepreneurs and inventors. I want to share with you my experience of what it means to bring in a whole new system of something that people weren't even thinking about 40 years ago. It has to do with money. It has to do with finance. It has to do with structure. It has to do with how ventures are legally expressed. It has to do with consciousness and bringing people together. I want to speak to your audience, wherever it is, and I'm available now to share what's happened along the way. I'm Kim Greenhouse. Bring me to your group. Thank you very much. And back to the show. Now what? Because it's not going to show up in the blood.
It's not going to show up in the blood.
Right?
So it shows up in the liver, it's being housed in the liver.
Yes.
And so that buildup of iron is going to put a wet blanket on copper metabolism and retinol metabolism and a whole bunch of enzymes. There's 500 enzymes in the liver. And that buildup of iron is going to have a deleterious effect, negative effect on the overall metabolism of the liver. And so what you're really asking for is, what do I do now? Well, what we really recommend within the root cause protocol is there's two parts to it. There's stops and starts. The stops are going to offend a lot of people because they've been doing it for years, not knowing that it disrupts copper metabolism, disrupts the production of ceruloplasmin, disrupts the production and activity of a lot of copper-based enzymes. Things like we tell people to stop taking iron supplements, stop taking vitamin D supplements, stop taking calcium supplements, stop taking zinc supplements, stop taking one a day as a rule. Don't do that. And then we encourage people.
That is going to upset a lot of people. That's going to really freak a lot of people out.
Well,
the D part is going to freak a lot of people out.
Well, if people,
because everybody's scared now, oh my God, if you don't get enough sun, you're going to be in trouble with D, and you better start taking it. I mean, it was a big push out there.
Look, I understand. I befriended a very famous lipidologist. He studied fats. His name was Fred Kummerow. And my strategy all along has been, if I find an article that I'm really impressed with, I'll just call up the author and thank him. Well, when I found this article by Fred Kummerow, I was living in Chicago. It was a really good article. I was like, wow, this guy understands it. So I dug, found his number, called him. And he said, well, thank you for calling. He said, would you like to come down for lunch? I said, he was living in Champaign-Urbana. It's a 2-hour drive. I said, I'll be there in a New York minute. And so a couple weeks later, I'm having lunch with Fred Kumro. Now, what the listener has to know is he's 98 years old. He was bigger than I was, full of vitality. And so we sit down to lunch, and it's grass-fed hamburger, his homegrown tomatoes. He
Oh my
loved
God.
he loved his chocolate milk. He was still working 20 hours a week in his lab. But what one of his signature research studies was a decade-long series of studies using pigs. People need to know that the physiology of a pig is very similar to the physiology of a human. And we've got friends who are pigs, right? Right? And so they're a lot more acclimated than we realize. But the point is, Dr. Kumaro realized that vitamin D supplements were very dangerous to human physiology.
Wow.
And so this is back in the 70s and early 80s, and he was invited to be a keynote speaker at an international symposium on vitamin D metabolism. And there were Nobel laureates invited to this meeting. Now, mind you, he got his PhD at University of Wisconsin in 1940. What does that mean? It means he was really smart because they were the mecca of lipid metabolism back then. And he gets up and he says, ladies and gentlemen, you do not supplement with vitamin D. And there was just this torrent of opposition and resistance. And I said, well, Dr. Kumaro, what happened as a result of that meeting? Now you got to picture this guy. He's like 6'2", 6'3", full of life. And he leans forward. He says, well, Morley, I'm the only one left standing. All the others are dead. And
Wow.
people say, oh, he had good genes. No, he knew what to supplement with and what not to supplement with. He was a big magnesium guy, huge magnesium researcher. And so when I find that kind of truth, then I begin to dig in. And for people who are interested, there's a masterclass that we have on the Root Cause Protocol website. And we go for 2 hours and explain why you need to rethink this vitamin D. And if you're still not convinced, at least get your nutrients from cod liver oil. Don't get it from a vitamin D only supplement. Because cod liver oil has 10 times more vitamin A than vitamin D. Why? Because it's 10 times more important. That's why. And nobody knows anything about retinol or vitamin A. And again, its most important property is its ability to activate copper, but also be involved in regulating iron. And again, all of that genius has been lost to the ages.
You know, most of what's on the internet in the health domain has people like, okay, what do I take next? Okay, what do I take next? Okay,
Right.
what do I take next? Okay, so-and-so said this. And there are a lot of people that can get up and they can be an expert in this domain, and then they start bringing in all these other domains. They're very authoritative. They speak with confidence, and people take it like it's true. It's a fact. It's true. Right. You know, how many years were we told that salt is bad for you?
Right.
You know, how many years did they took the American public off of salt for 50 years? I mean, real salt, not just table salt.
Right.
So, and how many influences until finally this scientist wrote a book called The Salt Fix about the study of salt, how it really works, the whole system.
It's a great book.
And I was off it, and I was a tournament tennis player, and I didn't salt, and I didn't take salt, and I didn't use salt, and that was shocking. It's the kind of revolutionary or transformational turnaround in thinking. When you think something's bad for you, how many years did we go without having eggs? Oh my God, eggs have cholesterol. It could cause a heart attack. You know, so there's all of these easy pronouncements. What I appreciate about you and your work is that you provide evidence and the history. So there's a flow, there's a progression of what came about, how it happened. We had Dr. Stephanie Zenef on to talk about the impact of glyphosate. That is the most disturbing thing
Mhm.
If most of our bodies have glyphosate because we ate whatever vegetables, fruits,
Mhm.
the grass was treated with it, the meat,
Right.
uh, what is your take on the relationship between bringing copper back in? We have glyphosate in our bodies and the impacts of that with the iron copper metabolism. Do you know what I mean?
I do.
What
Let me
is your
just
what is your take on that?
yeah, let me just amplify what Dr. Seneff might have talked about because this is really important.
Yeah.
Um, Glyphosate was patented as an industrial pipe cleaner. What's it really good at? Chelating minerals. That's its job. It's really good at it. Don Huber, famed scientist at now retired, but he's been studying glyphosate for a lot of decades. And what's important to understand is the kinetics, the speed with which glyphosate robs minerals out of the soil and out of your body. Wink, wink. So, for people who've lived in California or know
I
people who live
have.
in California, you know about earthquakes, and they're measured on a logarithmic scale. Earthquake of 3, it's dishes rattle, but everything's fine. But an earthquake of 12, wow, nobody's
Even
left.
6 is pretty bad.
6 is
Pretty
pretty
bad.
bad,
I've been in a 6. Yeah.
but 12 is devastating.
Yeah.
So let's come back to glyphosate. The minerals are being chelated at a different order of magnitude. And calcium and magnesium are being chelated at a 3.3. Iron and zinc at an 8.9. Copper, 11.9. So what is that telling us? It tells us that glyphosate is chelating copper a billion times faster than calcium or magnesium and 1,000 times faster than zinc and iron. Now, what's the problem with
Wow.
that? Well, those big numbers, a billion times faster, 1,000 times faster, we don't understand them. So they go right over our head, and we say, well, it can't be that important. Let's move back to something else to talk about. No, this is really, really important because I was in a meeting with Dr. Seneff back in 2018, a breakfast meeting. She's sitting right across from me, and she leaned forward and she said, Morley, do you want to know why glyphosate is so toxic to copper? And I thought I'd died and gone to heaven. And she shared,
Welcome back.
yeah, no, she shared this kind of knowledge with me. And so what to put it into context, there was a time when I could run an 8-minute mile. And at that same time, my younger son ran a mile in 4 minutes and 2 seconds. So he was twice as fast. Of course, I called him up, said, "You going to go for it?" He said, "No." He said, "It'd take me, I could work a year, maybe not shave those 2 seconds off." But the point is, that was twice as fast. When I was 18, I remember driving my mom's 350 SL Mercedes in Florida at 140 miles an hour. I was driving twice as fast as anyone else on the highway. There's a green wall that went by like that, but that was only twice as fast. We can't comprehend 1,000 or a billion times faster. So that's orders of magnitude. Glyphosate, in my humble opinion, was put on the planet to decopper the environment, to decopper the human, especially. Just my theory, can't prove it. But let's deal with what happened in 1987. The French government in 1987, when Monsanto was flexing its muscles worldwide, wanting to use glyphosate in all forms of farming throughout the world, France said no. It's against the law. We will not allow any glyphosate to be used anywhere within the borders of France. Okay, so they didn't. In 2022, what's that, 35 years after this declaration by the French government, Vive la France, uh, someone decided to see what impact that decision had on the health of French citizens. And what they found out in 2022 is that 99% of French citizens who've never been exposed to glyphosate in their food were peeing glyphosate in their urine. What
Oh
does
my
that tell
God.
us? Glyphosate is everywhere. It's in the air, it's in the water. And you can say, oh, but I only buy organic food. Doesn't matter. It's in the air, it's in the water.
Also, the countries deliver food to each other throughout
Of
Europe. I
course they
lived
do.
in Europe, right? Yeah, so
Yeah,
they,
right.
you don't know. You can have food from one country brought in, like Germany. I lived in Germany
Right.
and England and Spain, but in Germany, a lot of the foods were brought in from Spain.
Yeah. Oh, that
So
happens all the time.
right? So
And so
who knows?
the importance here is that I talked about the PAM enzyme. A lot of
Yes.
signaling peptides that need to be activated. There's two atoms of copper in that enzyme. If those two atoms of copper are not there, it no tiki, no washi. It doesn't work. And so I my theory can't prove it, but I think that one of the reasons why glyphosate exists is it's intended to kill the PAM enzyme. Isn't it curious that so many people need hormone replacement therapy now? Wink, wink, because they can't activate their own hormones. People are on all sorts of thyroid medication. Why? Wink, wink, because they can't get their active form of their T3 to do its job. And it goes on and on and on.
You know,
People with hypertension, not knowing that vasopressin, which is a very important enzyme in the body, very significant. Oh, it needs to be active. Oh, it needs PAM enzyme to activate it. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I forget to tell you that? And so we live in this toxic world, and we're just talking about one element, glyphosate. We haven't gotten to all the other elements that are out there. And
one of the
so,
scary things, though, Mary, just
yeah,
I want Morley, I want to ask you this. One of the things I asked her when I interviewed her was, "How do we detox from it?" And
mhm.
it wasn't so obvious in that, if I remember in that conversation, that there was a way forward for that, which was
sour
very disturbing.
sauerkraut juice appears promising.
Hmm.
What people need to understand about sauerkraut is that you take a cabbage and take 100 grams of it, and you're going to have 60 milligrams of whole food vitamin C in that 100 grams of cabbage. 100 grams of, excuse me, yeah, cabbage. But when you make sauerkraut, when you ferment it properly, you're going to increase the amount of whole food vitamin C tenfold. It's going to turn into 600 milligrams of vitamin C. Well, what's at the center of vitamin C? Tyrosinase enzyme. It's a very powerful enzyme. Nobody knows about it except for Sabiha uh, Merchant as a plant physiologist, but it's actually the enzyme that colors our body. So we're told that melanin is important for hair color, eye color, skin color, right? We know that.
Yeah, yeah.
It's the colors inside our body that matter the most. The heart is supposed to be red. The liver is supposed to be brown. The spleen is supposed to be purple. The gallbladder is supposed to be green. Very
Wow.
important. Those colors are very, very intentional and very, very important. And when I shared this a couple of years ago with my class, I have an online class. Uh, there was a surgeon. One of the students was a surgeon, and she said, "Morley, I've never seen a purple spleen."
Wow.
And you could have heard a mic drop because color has vitality, color has frequency and energy. And one of the most important organs in our body, which nobody knows anything about, is called the spleen. It's called the hidden organ. And it's also called the organ of odd numbers. 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, and 11 relate to the spleen. It's 1 inch thick, 3 inches long, 5 inches wide, weighs 7 ounces, but under stress, it can go up to 7 pounds. So a 16-fold increase in weight, and it hides behind ribs 9 through 11.
Wow.
So why would it go from 7 ounces to 7 pounds? What's accumulating in the spleen that nobody knows about? Oh, it's called iron because
Iron.
it's a major processing center for those 2.5 million red blood cells a second. Got to break them down. And if that iron starts to accumulate in the spleen, it's the gateway for All autoimmune disease flows out of the iron. Excuse me, it flows out of the spleen because the encapsulated bacteria and the pathogens and particularly the parasites can't be killed in the white pulp because the spleen is so preoccupied with red pulp, which is trying to process all the iron that's been accumulating in the spleen. And it's, to me, it's just this whole area of physiology that nobody knows anything about.
You're into energy medicine, aren't you? At a
Sure.
fundamental level.
Yeah.
And have you ever had acupuncture?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Did it
What do you
work for
think?
you?
What do you think the meridians are based on?
Yeah,
Co-
acupuncture. Yeah.
Copper. It's copper running the meridians. And what's interesting
Wait a
is that,
minute. Hold on.
yeah, I know, right?
Hold on.
Right? Wait a minute.
Ho- Say it again.
The
Copper
meridians.
runs the meridians? How
Yes.
do you know that? How did you come up with
What
that?
what I just make this stuff up. No.
No, really, on this.
No,
How did you like
one of my students is a very gifted reflexologist who's intensely passionate about acupuncture. And there's a German-based acupuncturist who made that declaration many years ago. Again, anytime we're
wow.
involved in moving energy, it's going to
Yeah.
involve copper. It's so central to life. There's a world-renowned mineral expert at Auburn University, Paul Cobine, Paul A. Cobine, in 2004 and 2006. He's the guy that said, "Oh, we've got 50,000 atoms of copper in every mitochondria." Okay, that sounds like a lot. And so we have 40 quadrillion, 15 zeros mitochondria in our body. Wow, that's another big number. I don't understand it, so it can't be very important. It's actually very, very important. And Paul Cobine went on record as saying there can be no life on planet Earth without copper.
So
Period.
so let me ask you this. I want to go back to retinol. And I
Yes.
know you talk about this day and night and day and night, and it's probably in your sleep. But for this audience right now, is part one with Morley Robbins. I want you to talk about how retinol works with copper and iron, where we get it from. I know part of you mentioned it in the cod liver oil, but and there's a lot of people who will say, I don't want to take cod liver oil. It tastes like hell and all that. I mean, when I take mine, I take it with tomato juice just because I don't know how else to
Right.
drown out
Right.
that lovely taste,
That's right.
So I want you to talk about retinol and why is this being missed? And yet there's retinol creams, right, out of Washington, a wonderful company that made a
Mhm.
retinol cream. Is it just for the
Right.
face or?
Well, they want you to believe that retinol is only skin deep. It's running the show. And again, for folks who haven't, they may be familiar with the book 1984.
Oh, definitely.
The book was written in 1948, the inverse. So when you subtract 1948 from 1984, you get 36. When you add 36 to 1984, oh, you get 2020. And that's what COVID was all about. It was the initiation of the totalitarian state here on planet Earth. That's what the whole thing was about. It was just a complete revamping of the world as we know it. And for those who thought it was real, didn't know it was an IQ test, it was a very traumatizing event. It was traumatizing for everyone, but
Right.
but you had to be able to step back and say, what's really going on here? And so when I started this work back in 2010, 2009, but more 2010, um, I started to um, pierce the mythology of all these things that we've been talking about. Oh, you got to watch your cholesterol. You got to make sure you get vitamin D. Blah blah blah. And Kim, I came across 36 lies. I went down methodically and identified 36 different parts of the narrative where they're completely wrong, absolutely fundamentally wrong. And when I got to 36, I said, so the whole thing's a lie. I flipped the narrative and said, okay, what are they telling us to do? Let's do the opposite. And then I began to study how would that affect energy production, ability to neutralize oxidative stress. And it was like it was the Rosetta Stone, was flipping the narrative upside down and putting it on its
You know,
axis.
nobody, you know what, Morley, you know this. Academicians and all the funding that goes into academia and all
Right.
the research, nobody wants to be wrong. And very few people are willing to be
Right.
wrong.
Right.
And it's the competitiveness and that permeates that domain that's also responsible for an unwillingness,
Right.
almost like a spiritual unwillingness, a hardness of the spirit to be willing to be that unwilling to be wrong. And so that's part of, to me, the psychology or the psyops of what we would say we've learned in school
Right.
of science is an unwillingness to be wrong. How many of these people went, very few went back, even with fluoride in the water. What, it's taken
Right.
60 years, and only now some are acknowledging it's poison, it's a toxin, it never belonged in our water, okay, and other chemicals, etc. But look how long it's taken. So we can plan on and we can know and we can expect that the domain of science and medicine will continually, as a human consciousness, be reluctant to being wrong, and that's the danger of being in full possession of our wellness.
No,
Is
it's
who
very,
we're
very true.
listening to?
Right.
It's who we're listening to. Who has
We've
the
been
authority to tell us?
we've been taught to listen to the authority figure, the expert, and largely it's the physician, not knowing that they don't get any training in nutrition, virtually
Right.
none. And so, I wanted to be a doctor at one point in my youth, my youth.
You've been spared.
I've been, and as a very dear friend said, it's a blessing you didn't get indoctrinated. But um, for many years, I thought I didn't get into medical school because I wasn't smart enough. I didn't do well in school, but and then I started to really study it and found out that actually most of the doctors are firstborns. That's a good thing to know about. And what's a
That's
firstborn?
interesting.
Firstborns protect the status quo. Firstborns don't question authority. And that's a very foundational psychological event is if you don't question authority, how are you going to grow? How are you going to really stretch the understanding? And so one of my clients years ago was a young guy in his 30s with Lyme disease. He couldn't work, but he decided to teach himself astrology. And so the day came when we were going to have his consult, and he opens up the conversation. Says, "Morley, what day were you born?" I'm like, "Well, that's an odd question, but November 15th." He said, "I knew it." I said, "What did you know?" He said, "I knew you were a Scorpio." I said, "How would you know that?" He said, "Only a Scorpio would dig, dig, dig the way you have to get to the truth." He said, "But only a true Scorpio would take on the entire medical establishment and not back down." And I won't, because the whole basis of the root cause protocol is to ignore the enemies, the pathogens, the toxins, the heavy metals, ignore the enemies, ignite the energy. And that's what we're all about. Let's let's
I
make
love
sure
it.
that let's make sure we've got copper. Let's make sure it's bioavailable. Let's make sure it's in the mitochondria, and let's start making some energy. And the blueprint that runs our body depends on energy. And they forgot to tell us that 80% of your immune system's in your gut. No, it's not. It's in the mitochondria. And so we've really got to have smart mitochondria to be able to be alert, to know what's going on, and to respond. And it's just this distortion of the truth over the last century that has caused us to lose our true north and lose sight of the fact that our ancestors go back to the research of Weston A. Price. He was out in the field 100 years ago discovering the truth of food and nutrition worldwide that was causing people to have perfect teeth. And what what a lot of people don't know is that
Wow.
he
I remember
he
him.
he knew that perfect teeth meant perfect spine meant perfect health. Because at a developmental stage in our fetus, we go from 32 buds to 64 buds. Well, 32 become our teeth, the other 32 become our spine. And so he was looking for what are the nutrients that we need to have in our diet in order to have perfect health. Why was he so driven to learn this? Because when his son was 12 years old, he gave him a root canal, as any good dentist would back in the 1920s. And for 4 years, his son struggled with his health and then eventually died. And he was so distraught. He vowed he was going to find out, how do you make perfect teeth? And what he discovered, which is really important, coming back to some of your other questions, his going in proposition was that people with perfect teeth would be vegetarian and they'd be low fat. That was his going in proposition.
Wow.
And because he was a meticulous scientist, he recorded in 14 different communities around the world that 65% of their calories came from fat, especially retinol, ding, ding, ding. And they all ate protein, animal protein, from ants in Maasai tribesmen in Africa to whale blubber up in Alaska. Everyone ate animal-based protein. And so
Which
he
is what
was,
people are trying to get rid of now, like
which is what people,
crazy. There's a big movement, a
of
push,
course,
and the transhumanist movement is trying to absolutely wipe
absolutely.
meat off. From Bill
I,
Gates buying up farmland and killing off all the animals and making lab meat and making it a number one
well,
priority. Oh my God!
well, Bill Gates is a franchise. Hillary Clinton is a franchise. I don't know who's behind them, where they just trot out their picture and, oh, they're doing this and that. It's like, okay, but there's someone behind that movement. I'm not questioning that at all. And
Yeah.
it's the antithesis of human health. We were designed, our mitochondria really were designed to burn fat, not sugar. I'm convinced of that. And so what did they do? What? Let me put it this way: what is something you would never do with your car? You would never pour sugar into your gas tank, would you? And that's
No.
exactly what we've done with our body. And all that started in the early 1900s when they were taking all of the minerals out of the food by refining them. Get it? Wink, wink. We're going to refine this, and then they had to put a lot of sugar in. Why? Because it tasted like cardboard. Had no had no nutritional value, and so they had to sweeten it up. And we've been living that diet, and now we're living it on steroids for 100 years. And so,
Even the alternative health area, Dr. Gundry and
yep,
Dr. this and Dr. that, and now a lot of the doctors are pushing allulose. Don't have sugar, have allulose. Where are you about allulose?
I
They
don't know
say
that
it's
much.
very good for the mitochondria. It's very good for the, what do you call it? Your stomach. What do you call
I,
that? That's that. Yeah, I'm like,
I come back to Michael Greenberg. What's enduring? What are the foods and sugars that sustained humanity for millennia? Galactose comes out of milk. Mannose, very important sugar. It's found in the vegetable kingdom. Um, the last sugar you want in your body is fructose.
right, because your
High,
body makes it, right?
well, your body
And
does make it, but high fructose corn syrup, which is the
ugh,
backbone of the food industry now, the first thing it becomes is called sorbitol. It's an alcohol sugar. And what does sorbitol do? Oh, it chelates 98% of the copper that's around it. Could that be a problem? And so when you are focusing on fructose as your sweetener, you're going to kill your liver. The rise of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease it's
it's
the
huge.
fastest growing disease on the planet. And it's like, we got a problem because people don't
And
understand. Yeah, go ahead.
no, and high fructose corn syrup has been added to all the young people's diets in
I know.
schools and everywhere,
It,
everywhere they go, in
it's a copper,
candy,
it's
in
a copper
everything.
chelator. Myra Fields a famous mineral physiologist at USDA, originally from Israel. She was there for 20 years. She started blowing the whistle on high fructose corn syrup in 1970. And here we are 55 years later. I mean, she wrote some impeccable research back in the day that proved this was beyond poison. Nothing changed.
So, if we can go back to retinol, I just
Yeah,
want to flesh it out a little more.
yeah.
And then I want you to share about hepcidin. I just want the public to hear it. Sorry.
That's all right. Leave them on a twisted note. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. Retinol. What does it do? What is its relationship to copper and iron?
Okay. Um,
Which
ret-
basically reflects its importance, its critical nature.
okay. So everyone knows when we go out in the sunlight, we're going to make some vitamin D. Okay, that's good.
We
And
hope.
what and how is it making the vitamin D? It's going to break down the cholesterol under our skin and turn it into the substrate that's needed to make vitamin D. Okay, we can all agree on that. The part that no one's ever told people is that when you go out in the sunlight, you're breaking down retinol in your diet. Where's retinol found? Oh, grass-fed butter, grass-fed heavy cream, yard eggs, breastfed beef liver, and cod liver oil. Those are 5 great sources of retinol. When you're breaking down retinol, you're breaking it down into what are called retinoids. And there are different classifications. There are what are called retinoic acids, and those are hormones, just like hormone D, but there's 4 of them. And they're really important. They're really powerful, and nobody knows anything about them. But the retinoic acids,
Including me.
right? That's okay. But retinoic acids, very powerful, very important for the body's physiology. But they also make what are called nuclear receptors, and they come in different flavors. There's RARs, retinoid A receptor, RORs, retinoid O receptors, RXRs, RZRs. There's gazillions of them. And like with thyroid, you mentioned that you had a thyroid issue. Well, you
Age
can't.
12, since
Okay.
age 12.
Well, you were retinol deficient. When you came out yellow, I knew
And
you
I
were
was
retinol.
I was a tournament tennis player starting at age 7.
That's great. That's
Actually,
beautiful. But you didn't have enough
but
retinol.
I didn't have enough a lot of things cuz we
Right.
didn't know anything at that time.
So
Are we
in
doing?
order to make thyroid hormone, you have to have RXR kissing TR, thyroid receptor. When those two can kiss in the promoter region of the gene, voila, we can make T4. And then the vast majority of that T4 travels down to the liver and it gets kissed by an enzyme called triiodinase enzyme to make
That's a long
T3.
word. Yeah.
90% of the T3 is made in your liver. Guess when that triiodinase enzyme stops working? When you have too much iron in your liver. And
Wow.
so the thyroid, this bow tie up here, it doesn't run the body. That's just a narrative. That's just to hijack your mind. Copper's what's running the show, folks. It really is. It's hard to fathom. Get the book, go to the website, listen to my 300 different podcasts. But the thing is, when the liver backs up with iron, it sends a lot of things into a tailspin. So back to the retinol. Why is it important for copper? Again, retinol and copper are supposed to be stored in the liver. Very hard to store things when they're full of iron. Ding, ding, ding. And the enzyme that loads copper into the protein ceruloplasmin is called ATP 7B, 7 Baker, 7 beta. Very, very important enzyme. It's a copper loading enzyme. And the key to turn on ATP 7B is retinol. Actually, it's 13-cis retinoic acid. It's one of those hormones that nobody knows anything about. There's another copper-loading enzyme called ATP7A, 7-alpha. There's about 50 or more copper enzymes, like PAM, superoxide dismutase, cytochrome C oxidase. We can go on and on. But they require a different copper-loading enzyme. But the key is also retinol. Again, 13-cis retinoic acid. And so when Eisenhower has this heart attack in 54, and Ansel Keys comes out of the blue and says, "We got to get cholesterol out of your diet. We got to get retinol out of your diet." People didn't know what was going on. And so they shut down the ability to make bioavailable copper in 1955. We're none the wiser. You want to have a fascinating read, get Betty Farmer's cookbook from Boston and look up the recipes and see what's in the recipes. It's all based on heavy cream, a lot of fatty substances, and there's foods in there that you've never heard of, but they're all nutrient-dense foods that we don't have today. Folks, we are Swiss cheese eating Swiss cheese. The nutrients have been taken out of the food. Why?
Right, out of the soil, out of everything, out of the animals.
Out of the animals. And so that ensures that we're going to have low energy, be more docile, and be more compliant with the game plan.
How do people find out about which copper to take? I know about Recuperate, which you've had to formulate, right, and put into place because other people weren't doing exactly what you felt needed to be done based on your findings. Are there other sources of copper? I mean, how are people going to get it if they're not ordering from there?
Well, there are other sources of copper, but what makes copper unique, unfortunately, is it needs to be in complex with other nutrients. It needs to be hanging out with retinol and the B vitamins that are in a desiccated beef liver. And there's all sorts of enzymes in beef liver. The spirulina that we have in our product. Spirulina is one of the richest sources of superoxide dismutase. Most people have never heard of it. Well, if we're not making water inside the mitochondria, we're going to make superoxide because we can't complete the cycle right. Superoxide needs to be neutralized. Well, the word dismutase, I wouldn't have used it. I would have just said neutralizer. But superoxide dismutase neutralizes superoxide so it doesn't become toxic inside the body. But it also, superoxide dismutase is one of the richest sources of copper on the planet, and it's found in prevalent doses inside spirulina. And so we used turmeric. Why? Because it's an anti-inflammatory. It's very, it's the active ingredient in curcumin, and so and we have it in two flavors, boron and without boron. But the other forms of copper, what makes copper unique is that unlike the other minerals, especially, they don't need cofactors. They don't need these other elements and nutritional elements to enable them to be bioavailable. That's what it's all about. It isn't that, I took a dose of this or that and everything's fine. You've got to understand that copper is unique on the planet, both in terms of its function, but in its use and how it gets synthesized in these enzymes and regulatory proteins.
The vitamin C that most of us are taking, I did a whole couple shows on vitamin C years ago.
Right.
And at the time, the big distinction was don't buy traditional vitamin C because most of it's made in China and it's not real vitamin C and has stuff in it that you don't want in your body.
Right.
So we were buying vitamin C from the Vitamin C Foundation. They were having it made in Europe, and Europe was bringing in the non-China vitamin C. And that's really the only distinction at the time that was being made with vitamin C. And so even now, our fruits and vegetables are being put a peel on them. Bill Gates' product, the peel, these chemicals all over them, which are saturating the fruits and vegetables. So in terms of getting whole food vitamin C, how do you see that happening?
Well, let's make sure people know that there's a difference between ascorbic acid and whole food vitamin C. They're not the same at all. So whole food vitamin C is like your car. It has an engine, a steering wheel, 4 wheels, and a cover. And the cover of that of that automobile is ascorbic acid. Ascorbic acid is the cover of the car and no moving parts. What's important for people to know is that the individual, one of my heroes, is Albert Szent-Györgyi, and that's Hungarian for Saint George. Szent-Györgyi, Saint George. And what did Saint George do? He slayed the dragon. What's the dragon in our body? Inflammation. What do you need in order to neutralize inflammation? You got to have copper. Where's the copper found? At the center of the engine called tyrosinase. It has 2 atoms of copper. Don't get any of that from ascorbic acid. But 18 months before he got his Nobel Prize in December of 1937, in the 4th of July, 1936, he wrote a letter to the editor of Nature Journal. There's a pecking order in the publication industry. Nature's up here at the top. And he wrote this letter about his research that he was doing with Hungarian peppers. And what he says in black and white, you can track it down if you're really curious. Ascorbic acid does not cure scurvy, period. And yet 18 months later, he's getting a Nobel Prize, wink, wink, for discovering ascorbic acid. And it's one of the great
Oh my
mysteries.
God.
Yeah, one of the great
I
mysteries
didn't know
of science.
that.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my.
And so I have a lot of respect for Szent-Györgyi. He's a brilliant man. But something happened. There was some political card
Maybe his
game
life
going on.
was threatened. That
Well, maybe
happens a lot.
it does happen. But the point is, we have been hoodwinked for almost
Yeah.
100 years. The
Yeah.
ascorbic
Long
acid
time.
was first made by Hoffmann La Roche in 1934,
And they're a pharmaceutical company, right?
big pharmaceutical company.
Yeah.
And I'm not denying that ascorbic acid is a part of our physiology, but it needs to be coming from a copper-related form, not from some test tube. Ascorbic acid by and of itself is not what we need in order to ensure our physiology. We need a constant source of biousable, bioavailable copper to run the machinery that regulates iron, regulates oxygen, and 13 other nutrients, substrates. And
How,
that's lost on modern science today.
how do you know how much the dosage should be? How did you come to that?
In terms of how much we get. So
Yeah, how much we need. How much we need of whole food vitamin C. Is there such a thing?
well, what the nutrient tables will tell you is you need 1,000 milligrams of ascorbic acid, but you only need 60 milligrams of whole food vitamin C. So when I see these dichotomous contrasts like that, I'm like, maybe they're pulling our leg, right? And so we recommend that people get at least 400 to 800 milligrams of whole food vitamin C. The beauty of it is it is water-based. It's water soluble. What you can't use, you lose. So there's no toxic buildup inside the body.
Right.
And that's true of the B vitamins as well. They're water soluble. And so the the basis of the dosing is just as we began to study it in the
Trial and error.
literature, trial and error, and just coming
Hmm.
up with numbers that seem to make sense. And the real challenge, Kim, is holding back because we could easily have 75 elements in the protocol, and we've tried to keep it as close to 12 as we can, just because people are going to get overwhelmed with activity. So
How can people reach you, Morley?
I've got a website,
Go ahead.
rcp123.org. On social media, there's the Root Cause Protocol group. There's a Root Cause Protocol page. We're on Instagram. We're on YouTube. Um, for those who are really interested in connecting with me, my email address is morleyrobbins@gmail.com. And for those courageous few that really want to talk to me, my phone number is area code 847-922-8061. I get calls all day long, all week long. Happy to chat with people and answer their questions and make sure they're moving in the right direction. And really appreciate the chance to have this kind of engaging dialogue to kind of pull the curtain back on a very important piece of our physiology.
Last question in finishing. God
Yeah.
comes to you and says, Morley, you have to leave an exclamation mark after your life. And that exclamation mark is going to integrate and going to move to billions of people so that after your passing, whenever that is, that the work, the knowledge, the reference, the keys remain. A lot of people, after their lives, their bodies of work disintegrate or disappear, either by people left or they start modifying, changing, etc.
Right.
What is your exclamation point?
I actually have three.
Okay.
It's a three-part.
Why not? I like that.
Yeah, three-part. I'm 72. I have more energy now than when I was in my 50s. So, I don't know how long I'm going to live, but my work's not done yet. I know that. But the three things that I fully intend to do. One is there's a blood test that's not allowed to be done, for the most part worldwide, that tells us how intelligent our copper enzymes are. And it's called the ferroxidase enzyme assay. It's telling us not just how tall it is, but how smart it is. And I fully intend to create a lab that's going to allow that. Second thing is I want that same lab to make ceruloplasmin, this very important copper protein. Let me be very crisp and very graphic with people. In 1958, I'm 6 years old. My dad, who has manic depression and schizophrenia, is going to have his second electric shock therapy. And he says, not going to happen. And he runs away from home, never to come back. Now imagine my surprise. That was 1958. Imagine my surprise a few years ago when I'm reading about a study done at Tulane University in 1959, the next year, where they're administering one shot of ceruloplasmin to 34 people who have schizophrenia, and 30 of 34 are cured.
Oh my God.
No more schizophrenia. And they've done this with malaria, with heart disease. It's like, but in a research setting, we don't need to tell anybody about it. And so this word that people can't pronounce,
Ceruloplasmin. Plasmin.
it's really powerful. It's really important. So I want to have a lab that's going to make that. And it can be black market. If you know about it, you can get it. We're going to make it happen. Third thing I want to do is create a copper-centric AI and get past this charade of information, because people are blathering on about, oh, AI told me this and AI told me that. And I've got many students out there who say, but what about copper? What about ceruloplasmin? What about ferroxidase? And the AI will say, oh yeah, that's important. They'll never bring it up on their own. And
Well,
so,
I've done a talk about AI a couple of times, and it's very clear to many of us already that it will be as good as its programming.
Of course.
And its management, how it's designed to manage first the programming, what it's taught, then how it's taught to manage whether you get the information you don't get, whether it's confused with other things, whether it's clarified, whether it's emphasized. This is This is the interior,
Right.
inner workings of AI. So you're right. It depends. It
So
sounds
it's
like you need a large language model that's separate
right.
to infuse this. You need to build your own large language model.
And we've already started.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
And just for grins and giggles, where I might house all this is in Cuba, but you got to spell it right. CU-BA. So
I
you
hear
can see
you.
the symbol for copper. So that's
For
my
those
exclamation point.
Fantastic. For those of you who are interested in the work that we're doing with It's Rainmaking Time, go to itsrainmakingtime.com or CH. We may pop the show over at YouTube like we do. We don't mark it on YouTube. We just kind of let it be there. And if there are people that want to fund It's Rainmaking Time or contribute to have more guests on, we used to do it every week, and now we're doing it once a month, a once-a-month special. And for those of you who would like to participate in a live Q&A with Morley and It's Rainmaking Time, please get back to us and let us know. And we want to thank you so much for being here. Morley, God bless you. It's such an honor to be alive with you at this time in history. Thanks so much for everything you're doing.
Thanks again for the opportunity. It's a great discussion.
Thank you. It's Rainmaking Time.